The Colts are on the road taking on the Ravens for tonight's Monday Night Football matchup. Let's get into the fantasy impact here for these players. We'll start with the quarterbacks. Lamar Jackson, his passing yards have increased each week this season. We'll see if he can continue that trend tonight. He's averaging about 70 rushing yards on the ground per game so far this season. The Colts have already given up over 450 total rushing yards through these first 4 weeks this season. Lamar's in your lineup. You've had him there since Thursday. We know he's there. Let's go to the other side of the ball. Carson Wentz has been sacked a whopping 10 times already this season. Now faces a Baltimore defense that has 10 total sacks through 4 games. If he can hold a clean pocket, he's likely to have a fine fantasy night for himself and his fantasy wide receivers. Baltimore's giving up about 273 passing yards per game, 25th in the NFL. With all that being said, though, Carson Wentz is still not a recommended start in redraft or DFS for tonight. Let's switch over to the running backs here. Jonathan Taylor, is he hitting his stride finally for us? Put on a monster performance last week against the Miami Dolphins' putrid rushing defense. We'll see how he looks tonight against a more stout Ravens defense, though they certainly haven't looked like themselves from years past. They're 23rd against opposing running backs for fantasy, gave up 17 points to Josh Jacobs, 24 to DeAndre Swift. I think we see a nice game from Jonathan Taylor tonight. They've allowed 5 total rushing touchdowns on the season. Nyheim Hines as well. He's been more game script dependent. I think they're going to need him tonight, though, to keep up for this Baltimore attack here. So he's a running back 3 play with upside. And now let's go over to footballguys.com to look at this Ravens running back room. It's a little bit of a mess right now. We're going to go over to footballguys.com, look at that Baltimore Ravens snap count summary, one of the many, many awesome tools on the website. You can see that last week, Latavius Murray handled the bulk of the workload here with 62% of the snaps, but they also had Le'Veon Bell take 27% and threw Devonta Freeman in there as well. So it's tough to rely on one guy, but if you're going to pick one, it is Latavius Murray. He had 18 carries last week, 59 yards, and 1 touchdown. Worth noting, the Colts defense held Miami last week to just 35 yards on the ground. They've given up 90 or more yards to both Chris Carson and Derrick Henry this season, but they still remain 6th against fantasy running backs. So it's going to be really interesting to see how the Ravens look on the ground tonight. Let's switch over to wide receivers. Unfortunately, it looks like Rashod Bateman will not suit up tonight for his rookie debut, which is such a bummer. We'll have to wait till next week to see him play. But Hollywood Brown, he has been rolling. He now faces a Colts defense. They're 20th against wide receivers for fantasy. And excluding Week 5's data, Hollywood Brown ranks top 10 in receiving yards and touchdowns. He came back strong last week with that performance, caught that beautiful touchdown pass in the end zone. He stretched out. He'll likely build on that performance tonight. I'm playing him as a wide receiver too with a lot of upside. Sammy Watkins, he's getting consistent targets per game. He's just not producing for your fantasy lineups. He's a nice DFS dart throw with Bateman needing one more week to come back. On the other side of the ball, the Colts, Michael Pittman Jr., 12 targets, 8 targets the last 3 weeks. He's now going against the Ravens as the 6th best, though, against fantasy wide receivers. They've yet to allow a 100-yard receiver all year. I'm still playing Pittman tonight as a high-end wide receiver 3 with upside. Zach Pascal and Paris Campbell, they're simply dart throws here. They're not seeing enough looks, but could get into the end zone here. Moving over to speak about the tight ends. The tight end position, the Ravens are allowing the most points per game to opposing tight ends in half PPR. Mo Alie-Cox in your lineup tonight is not a terrible dart throw, redraft, or DFS. He had a big performance in week 4, so if you're throwing him in there to chase those recent points and production, he may produce again for you. Of course, Mark Andrews on the other side of the ball for the Ravens is in your lineup. The Colts are middle of the pack against fantasy tight ends, about 15th overall. Andrews has not popped yet this season for us because he hasn't gotten into the end zone, but he's given us a steady 10 or more full PPR points over the last 3 weeks, so he's not killing your lineups either. Make sure you continue to roll him out there as those touchdowns will come soon enough for him. Now, I want to show you one last thing over here. Footballguys.com, we have all the statistics you could want to see for players, matchups, targets, passing and rushing averages, fumble recoveries and sacks, team target summaries, team red zone, everything you could look for in stats. If you're a numbers person like me, they're all at footballguys.com. Make sure you check out those and many, many more of our awesome tools for your lineups week in and week out. Thanks for listening and good luck with your matchups tonight.